been a lot of continued negativity when it comes to Veve and itself. Some of it is completely justified, others not so much. So in this video, we're going to discuss sort of the fundamentals of what's going on at the moment, my thoughts on it all, and maybe how we can start to move forward a little bit with this, with the information that we have. So let's get started. Welcome in everyone, my name's Andy and I appreciate taking some time out of your day to come watch this video on the channel. Just before we get going, if you are enjoying the content, you want to support me further, you can hit a subscribe button. If you want to support me further than that, you can join the membership. Okay, so we obviously know there's a lot going on. If you're someone who's in Veve, you would have understood what's happening. The market's down, MTL isn't coming yet, there's not really many announcements that are happening, so there's just a lot of negativity happening, and it's obviously bringing down a lot of people who are maybe bullish towards the project. It's putting people further down who are bearish towards the project. So I want to give my thoughts on it all, just the information that I have, reasons behind some of the decisions I am making, just trying to hit an overview that is not bullish or bearish. It's just trying to get that neutral point of understanding what is happening and maybe why it's happening. The first one that I'd say is probably the biggest one that people are after is MTL. Now, the reason this is going even further than it has been in the past is because Recur just announced their global MTL, and Hero, an app licensed and partnered by DC, have already had cash out available for the countries that is already available in, and that is through IMX and the Hero app itself. Now granted, I can't actually cash out on the Hero app itself right now. I've had some issues with it. I know a lot of other people have, so if that is you, just send in a ticket. They've said they've sent it on to the team relevant that can actually help me, so I guess we'll see in the next few days what happens with that. However, back to the MTL itself. Because Recur have now announced the global MTL and also Hero have been doing it from the start within the countries, it's made Veve look even worse than they already were at the time with MTL not coming out. And Veve have in the past overpromised and completely underdelivered with the results that they'd actually given to MTL, putting more logs in the fire, you know, chucking stuff in, let's see it all burn and let's everyone just hate and bring the negativity on it. And to be honest with you, I feel the overpromising underdeliver is completely justified. I don't think anyone should ever do that. I've done that in the past where I've tried to overpromise and I've underdelivered because I just couldn't live up to the same expectations that I'd set. I know most of you have probably done that before as well. Having it with a business where your investments are in or you have actually put money into makes it even worse. It's actually a really good ploy, the likes of Hero and Recur, with announcing that. At the end of the day, although they can work together to bring everyone up, they are competitors. You know, they are looking for market share in specific areas to bring people into their space and remain in their space spending money. Because a business is not a business without making some revenue unless you're a charity. Even at that, you're still having to make revenue. So when this is the case, by hitting at the pain points that other companies are facing, you are able to gain an advantage, a step up, something that makes people pay more attention to what you're doing. Recur have got cash out already. I'm going to invest a little bit into those. Hero, I can actually take my money out, and Interoperable with Immutable X, something I've wanted on Veve for a while. I'm going to pay attention to that. So there are things that happen when it comes to this, and chosen by the individual companies to take away some form of market share and bring more eyes onto the project. Whether that's in good intentions or bad intentions, it still does happen and it is something to consider. So with this being the case, this area for negativity, I believe, is completely justified. With these overpromises and not delivering at all, as of yet anyway, it can make a lot of people bring a negative sentiment to what Veve is. And I totally agree with that. What I don't agree with is trying to rush a process that we don't actually have the knowledge on. Now, when it comes to these different companies, I try to look at it on a wider scope. You know, Recur is not on a mobile app. They also didn't have gems that were put in as a currency, and they also haven't really released that much as of yet. When we also take it to Hero, they are solely licensed by DC, Warner Brothers, that sort of area. They're already working with a company who's been able to do this in a variety of areas with Colex. Now, this is nowhere near a scapegoat for what Veve is. I am quite frustrated with the way they'd handled this and the way they've actually done this. However, what I am saying is that the business fundamentals of bringing out MTL is different. Recur and Hero, I believe, are both based in the United States, whereas Veve is based in New Zealand. Now, there's bound to be different laws when it comes to what they can actually do in those instances and what can actually happen. I'm just trying to give a neutral point of view from what's happening here. I'm not saying someone is in the complete wrong, and I'm not saying someone is in the complete right. There's things that businesses are doing to get a little bit of leverage, and these things are good. It brings in healthy competition, and it allows people to see from a wider view maybe what's happening elsewhere and how they can learn from that. The next one that we kind of touched on was interoperability. Now, Hero is an app that's just been released, and I've talked about it a few times on the channel. You can watch some of my videos on it, and it's actually been a lot of fun. You're able to collect DC cards, and you're able to trade them, buy them, sell them, cash out, and also they are interoperable with IMX, something that we have wanted on Veve for a very long time. Now, I will say this has been incredible to see. Hero actually has a trade volume of $2 million with a total of 18,000 trades and an average price of $114. Now, on IMX, people have been spending crazy amounts of ETH on something that has just been released in a company that hasn't really established itself yet. There's been some 20,000 sales, if I'm not mistaken, for some of the mythic cards when it comes to legendaries. And what this makes me extremely excited for is when we get the opportunity to sell, buy, and trade on the IMX platform through Veve stuff. If we're looking at a mythic Batman when it comes to selling for 20k, think of the low mint Todd McFarlane Batmans when the big ETH giants can actually get into this and the business has become more successful or has gotten to a place where more people believe in what they're doing by being licensed through these biggest companies in the world. Now, Veve itself still have a lot of room to grow when it comes to that, but the fact that Hero, a company that's sort of on the rise, has quite a lot of people from Veve coming over to Hero and seeing these types of sales already through the interoperability blows my mind and makes me so damn excited for the time that Veve eventually get onto this platform and have more interoperability with what they're doing. It's one of those things where it's when. We know that it's going to happen, so it's not an if it will ever, but it's just when this will be the case. And that's the problem with this space at the moment, because it moves so quick and a lot quicker than other companies. Being a tech company in this sort of era and also working with these big brands, I'm sure things move slower than an individual artist would be able to do in this space. So with Hero targeting DC and with the cards, it's probably a lot easier to get on that platform when their aim was to be on that platform right from the beginning. And with IMX, obviously that worked over a period of time. Veve have said that IMX are working with that integration to OpenSea, so maybe they've got more things in the pipeline before Vive's coming in. There are things to consider with that front, but for me, it is one of those things that I would really like to see this year, because the sheer volume that Hero have been able to get with over $2 million worth of trade volume just in a very short space of time, and then consider all the brands that are on Veve and everything that could be going on there, it's something that I am exceptionally excited for. With that, of course, we come into the sort of negative side of it, that we don't actually know when this is going to happen. We don't know how it's going to happen. We don't know if all of the brands are going to accept it right away. I would believe that they would already know that this is a good move for them because it will make them more money in the long run, but I guess we just have to see when this comes about. This is when we look a little bit more about the success of tech businesses themselves and just what they are in general. I would say personally, Veve's classed as a tech company. I'm not 100% sure if that's exactly what it would fall under, but for me, that kind of seems to be the case with what they're aiming for and what they're moving forward with anyway. Two of these articles that I'd read, I wanted to understand a little bit more about the longevity of tech companies and maybe their time span before they can be truly successful with what they are. Now, in this startups, it said the short answer, it takes at least 4 years just to get pointed toward a real business. And I'd argue it takes 7 to 10 years to make your startup truly the success that you had in mind when the idea came to you. Another one with the heading, most small businesses take at least 2 to 3 years to be profitable and become truly successful once they've hit that 7 to 10 year mark. Most small businesses take years to be successful despite the overnight success of companies like Facebook. So in these both articles, you can read them if you want. I think I'll read through them both just to understand that a little bit further. But what I'm trying to get at here is that I invested in Veve because of what I believed it could be once more people accept what NFTs and digital collecting is actually going to become. So my plan was minimum 5 years. And if we say that Veve started in 2017, we're sort of sitting at the 5-year mark-ish anyway. Of course, we're talking about Ecomi starting at that time, and then we're talking about when the app actually released because we're only a year into the app itself. So if we're talking overall company, we're talking 5 years, but then if we're talking actual business practice, it didn't actually actually start making real sales until end of 2020. So it's a hard one to actually gauge, but for me, I'm personally waiting on the 2026, 2027 mark before I'm actually judging my whole investment, what it was, what it's actually been, and what it's done. Because this space and what the people are coming in for has been NFTs in general, and maybe some of the cryptocurrencies, they move a lot differently and are expected to have a lot more than just general stocks for that. And because we're in the startup phase of this and probably still the early stage of Web3, it's going to be a struggle to please everyone, and people are really not going to be happy with the way people make decisions, especially from management. Again, it's one of those things where we can argue back and forth all day about something's going well, something's not going well, they should be further along at this point, they're actually doing really well at this point. And for me, because I got into this for the longevity of it, and I was minimum 5 years when I got in, it just doesn't bother me the way that things are happening right now. I know for a fact that nothing goes up and up and up. It's just not the case. And Taps Trades actually done a video discussing like all-time highs of Veve and then also comparing it to OpenSea projects, because he was discussing the sort of conflict with Ukraine and Russia right now, how markets actually shift and why things don't always go up. Because we are at a 60% decrease from the all-time high in January that we'd had when it came to Veve, but it's still massively up when we compare it to last year's prices with what some of those things were at. Todd McFarlane was sitting at like $250 for 6 months or so before he started to really rise up. That was an insane concept to even me that this was the case. And when he also looked at the likes of Bored Ape Yacht Club, Doodle's company Clone X, I believe, that was purchased by Nike, all of these took massive dips, close to 50% of their all-time high during this conflict, just the same as Veve has. Now, they have started to bounce back, and I'm guessing there's a few reasons for this. But we also have to take note that in any investment, if we're classing this as an investment, then it's not going to always go up. There's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be things that go wrong. No company is always going to be successful. I think recently, even Facebook lost, was it the most they'd ever lost in the world, and most any company had ever lost in one day? I'm actually going to check right now. Facebook suffers 230 billion wipeout and biggest one-day US stock plunge. Facebook are one of the biggest companies in the world, biggest tech companies in the world, and still managed to lose 230 billion in one day. If you think for a second that you are in investments that they will always go up, you are wildly mistaken, and you need to do more research in order to actually understand that and be able to control your emotions when it comes to things rising and falling. Cryptocurrency itself is the most volatile market that there is right now, and NFTs sort of are alongside that. So if you don't think that your investments can go down 60% in one day, rise 120% the next, go down 200% the next day, and more, you're going to be really upset when the market trends start to happen for this. Let's then look at the sort of fundamentals of the business. Has things changed? Are we still on the track to where they want to go? Or has the business itself completely shifted 180 from what we're at? Because obviously if you've invested in a thing for it to become something and then it's no longer going to become that, then yes, the fundamentals have changed. The business is no longer what the business set out to be maybe when you put your investments in. Well, some of the things that I took note of, that MTL is going to be at the forefront, or is at the forefront probably of their priorities right now, especially since their competitors are all doing it around them. They probably have to step their game up in that front and actually match them when it comes to that, because to stay competitive, you have to keep up with your competitors and also bring a little bit of uniqueness to it. So with this, that probably wasn't in their plans to be at the forefront of their business by this time. At this point, it was probably to grow the app, to grow the user base, to bring in the marketing and all that sort of stuff. But now that we have MTL and everyone's desperate for it, this has sort of probably become the forefront of what Veve is right now and what they need to actually succeed at doing. And therefore, that area of Veve has definitely changed, because their plans going from aiming at the 60,000 user mark, I think we saw on Immutable, it was like 560,000 users. I know they'd said millions of users, but I think we'd found that it was actually way less than that. We weren't taking into account other things when it came to secondary accounts and all that sort of stuff. That area has changed for the time being, but I don't think the fundamentals of what they're trying to bring out has. When we talk like the tokenomics, that had to be sort of shifted. Tokenomics can no longer abide by the burns because of security risks. So that means, yes, those sort of fundamentals of burning had to change. But if we're looking overall fundamentals of what Veve were doing. It was to create a digital collectible experience where people could collect, trade, buy, sell anything they want, their favourite characters in the world from all the biggest brands in the world. They wanted to release things like the Master Collector program, the Omi Utility program, and to me, they're still all in the pipeline. They're still all there, so the fundamentals are still the same. It's just they've not been delivered at the time that they'd wanted it to, maybe in the quick succession that they'd had in mind. This is where we can discuss, again, we can go back and forth, negatives, positives, all the time, all day long, if we really wanted to. But to me, when it comes to my investment, the fundamentals haven't changed. They are still aiming to become the biggest company in the world, working with the biggest brands in the world to bring your favourite characters to the digital space. And that is what they're continuing to do. There's going to be things that will take longer than expected, and we know this is just the case. It's already been confirmed that we're getting delays on these things. But when we're looking at long term, this is the case. If you're a short-term thinker, maybe this is your time to get out of Veve, and that's totally fine. That's okay. That's your investment at the end of the day. You can do what you want with your investment. But when we're thinking about why we're investing and what the reasons are behind doing so are, then nothing has really changed for the long run. Let's then bring it to the bot problem, something that has been discussed for a long time. We made videos on this, I think 4 or 5 months ago, discussing the bot problem and the information that we had at that point. So Veve came out with a statement discussing the bot problem that they'd had and how they were trying to take the best measures they possibly could until they got KYC, or Know Your Customer, into this place. The way we've been able to find more information is because of the transfer of Ethereum, and we're able to see the number of new accounts that are getting these drops. So account that has nothing, and then the number of new accounts that are getting these drops when they come out. And I know at the start we were seeing thousands and thousands of new accounts getting this. And that's okay, especially in a time where everything is running up and there's a lot of new users coming in. But because we've been in a sort of bear market-ish when it comes to the Veve market, thousands and thousands of new users getting a new drop every single time just doesn't add up. So in that instance, they had to take some form of action, and by doing so, they stopped the transfer of gems and they also stopped the transfer of collectibles. And in the most recent drop for the comic, I don't think I've ever seen that amount of people on my Twitter timeline who actually got the drop. So whatever they had done there definitely worked in some instance. There were a lot more people who had not gotten a drop since like November and December that were able to get a drop here because of the things that they had done in order to stop maybe the bots from getting it. Again, this is a sort of whack-a-mole situation where they have to continuously upgrade what they're doing and try to bypass what the bots are doing in order to do that. There's a lot of information that I don't know that goes on behind the scenes. I'm not some tech wizard, so I'm not going to be able to establish exactly what's happening, why it's happening, how they do it. I don't know all the backgrounds behind the bot problems. But what I do know is that once KYC and the queue system comes out, they have a lot of better plans to hopefully stop the amount of bots that are getting in, meaning new users who are actually coming in are getting the drops and they actually deserve the drops. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when KYC is announced, but I believe again that is sort of at the forefront of their priorities right now, to get in place and to actually get started so that they can genuinely build customers again, are loyal to Veve and what they're doing because they're actively working on developing it further. The one thing I will say, and something that many people who are better and more knowledgeable at the bot problem than I am, is that the way to stop this is to stop buying from the bots on the market. So if you do see someone who potentially looks like a bot, I know it's hard to sort of distinguish, and it's one of those things where it's a sort of guessing game at the end of the day, but the most common things that they have is no collectibles in their account, they've got no profile picture, their name looks like randomly generated from something. If you can find someone who has a few collectibles in their account, maybe they've got a little bit of a bio, they've got their picture there, liked a few things, that could be a good sense that they're genuinely a real person. It's not dead set in stone, it's not going to be the case, you're never going to be able to exactly determine this is 100% a bot, this isn't, but if you do look for those people and you can pay for those who do have some collectibles, then you're stopping the bots from getting the gems into their account. You're stopping them from cashing out at really, really low rates so that they can manipulate the market and take away from what Veve's meant to be. I know this is easier said than done and it's probably quite hard overall, but I would recommend trying that anyway if you have the means of doing so. I get it, sometimes it just works for you to buy the lowest on the market and that's totally understandable. But if you do have a little more to spend and you're wanting to see Veve succeed, this could be a way that you could do that slightly. It's like one of those one step in the right direction where more people do it and then it helps over time. The final thing I'm going to talk about today is the negativity that is often spread through social media, mostly Twitter, and the cause effect that this has. So when people are on the sort of brink or on the ledge of giving up on something, of an investment or anything that they're doing, it only takes like a flick in order for them to jump off the cliff and then become someone who just despises what Veve as a company does. And because this happens so much, it's like a cycle over and over again where the same people complain and complain and complain and complain, and then all they do is try to compare and contrast things that are not comparable, and it just causes this negative space for not the right reasons. There's always times to be constructive for things that happen, but when you're just solely negative for the sake of being negative, it never benefits anyone, and all it does is create a negative sentiment for a market, for a company, and for something. Now, I agree that there's times to be constructive and really hard with what you're doing because your message needs to get across. Videos like these, personally, I believe are the best way to get through, because I can use this channel and others can use their channels to talk to Veve in a way that isn't just a screaming child match. When that's the case, I don't think anything gets done. I think all that you do is you just block them and move on, because they're just using emotion rather than logic. Now, these people use logic as well, and they definitely can, but the problem is when emotion comes to the forefront instead of logic, the emotion looks like it's took over, and therefore the logic just isn't really focused on anymore. If you do have issues with Veve, if you do have problems, bring them in a constructive manner, then come up with solutions in order to move that forward. How can you get this problem to be less of a problem? How can you make this company that you like and enjoy to be better than it already is? And by consistently doing that and having good conversations, you're able to bring something to the table that the people with the footballer headers behind them on the Twitter can't do, because all they do is scream and shout like a child who wants everything and don't get their way. Companies are a lot more complicated than just you screaming on Twitter. If you can't come up with a solution to a problem, you are the problem. You're just causing more issues for things that are probably being worked on in the background. You just don't have the data to know. There's one more thing that I'm going to say, and I've talked about this in some of my videos before, and it's Veve's got to make sure that their management is ready for the changes that are going on. A 0 to 1 million startup is a lot different to a 1 to 10 million startup. The changes that happen as your company grows has to adapt to the people who are actually working on the business to get them there. So if people in your company are not ready and are not at the place in the mental capacity for you to actually get to that next stage, you have to be straightforward with what they're doing and what their intentions are. Maybe some people aren't ready to reach that next stage for Veve. Maybe they're better off in different positions, and that's okay. But we have to admit that that could be the case. There is areas that need improvement, and we know this for a fact. So we have to look at the overall business itself and who is best for this position and maybe who is not. For Veve as a business, they need to make sure that they are looking at that. They need to know the ins and outs of that and know that the people that they have working for them or actively working to grow their business are the right people who can do just that, who can deliver on what they're saying they're going to do. I know this is quite a long video of me discussing sort of everything that's been going on with Veve over the last coming weeks, some of the frustrations that we've been happening, but I want to use my channel to talk neutrally or to try to be more solution based than just negative based. There's people who are screaming all the time about wrong, 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 and I just feel it doesn't get us anywhere. I really don't. I'm not that type of person, and I would never want someone to just scream at me for saying I'm doing everything wrong constantly without actually telling me, hey, there's room to grow with this. We understand that there's problems. Let's try and work out solutions. Now, maybe you've thought here that none of my solutions are actually good. Maybe you've thought what I've discussed here is complete rubbish, and that's totally fine, because at the end of the day, we all have our own opinions. But to me, this is the way I feel I can best get across my opinion and also some of the community's opinions when it comes to how they can move forward and how they can make their company something that we absolutely adore again. It's not to say I don't adore Veve and what they're doing, but I know there's some things and issues that need to be worked out, and they know that too. Now is the time to be solution based. Now is the time to understand what you're wanting out of this, what you're wanting out of an investment, a community, anything like that. What do you want this community to be, and how do you become that person that is actively involved in that community that you want it to become. That is the important part here. If you want it to become something, but you are not wanting to be that person, then you shouldn't be here, because if you're not willing to put in the work to get that community to the place that you want it to be, then you're not a part of that community. You're just someone who's screaming from the outside. If you want something to be successful, a community drives that forward. That's why the Bored Ape Yacht Club, Doodles and all that continue to remain successful with what they are, and Veve is still incredibly successful for what it is. It's just got bumps in the road right now that need to be solved, else that community will disappear and disperse into other projects. This isn't a bad thing. This is good competitive nature. We need to see what Veve are going to do in order to understand that and be competitive in their field. Time is really the only thing we're going to have to wait for. We're going to have to see what they do, and we're going to have to see what they're really pushing forward with. Are things going to roll out quite smoothly once they get past this obstacle, or are things going to take even longer than they'd said before? I guess we're going to find out. I know the video on the screen now will be something you'll love to watch. Have a fantastic day.